Every session of this symposium proposes a different way to think about the global. And this session is devoted to the planetary. Let's make it move. And you might consider it the largest, most encompassing perspective here. So we're zooming out, we're in for a scaling up, not just in terms of space, but also in terms of time. If the global is the Earth according to humans, the planetary is simultaneously an effort to think of the planet as a holistic but not universal system, and to think about more than its human inhabitants. So might a planetary perspective, for instance, allow us to connect the new normal of flooding from Jakarta in Indonesia to the state of Louisiana in the United States? And can the planetary help us understand such weather events within intertwined histories of capitalism, colonialism, and the unequal resource distributions they entail? It's this kind of model that was recently used when Saul Liuya, a farmer in the Peruvian Andes, filed a suit against Germany's largest energy company, RWE. The lawsuit argues that although RWE does not operate in Peru, it has contributed to about 0.5% of the emissions that are causing climate change, and that it should therefore be responsible for half of that 1% of the cost of containing the lake that might destroy Liuya's house as a result of the glacier that melts above it. As Rob Nixon writes in his book, Slow Violence, we are faced with catastrophic events that are low in instant spectacle, but very high in long-term effects. The long-term, non-spectacular nature of the climate crisis presents a problem of visibility, essentially, and a challenge to modes of representation. In the Andean case, visibility is sought within a legal framework of proof, one that links emission to glacial melt. Manifesting interconnectedness against the abstracting forces of temporal and geographical distance is a puzzle that I think many cultural producers grapple with. It's also a challenge that the arts are, perhaps, uniquely positioned to address. Our panelists today, working in the fields of history, anthropology, and art, provide critical tools, theoretical, methodological, and visual, for making tangible connection at multiple scales and across variable distances. Jumana Mana, for whom the image here is drawn, prompts us to think about how immense histories, the traversal of thousands of miles and uneven development, are embodied in even a tiny seed and its movement between Aleppo in Syria, the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, and Svalbard in Norway, allowing us to reimagine histories, time, and even archives beyond a human-centered nexus. Since his important essay, The Climate of History, Dipesh Chakrabarty, who weather patterns prevented from being here, and thus joins us via Skype, fingers crossed, has continued to address the fundamental destabilization that climate change poses to historical distinctions between the human and the natural sciences. He also complicates discourses of collective human culpability by giving voice, for example, to the inhabitants of slums in New Delhi, disproportionately feeling the heat of global warming, and who desire air conditioners to mitigate the effects of a crisis that was produced elsewhere. And Stoller allows us to think about the ecological aftermaths of imperial projects as racialized and contamination as concentrated in particular places, and how often those most harshly affected by global warming coincide with people who are already marked as disposable in histories of colonial violence. She urges us to think of colonialism in the present, not as a picturesque ruin to be found somewhere, but as an ongoing process of ruination that's all around. Joseph Masco teaches us that the planetary imaginary has a Cold War history, a vision of the world as one interconnected space that arose out of nuclear testing and fallout. He thus unpacks the contradiction between boundary-defying nuclear calamities and the national security apparatuses that produced them, which are perpetuated today in solutions to global warming that are conceived in terms of national borders and walls. So this panel attempts to bring together the globe of globalization with the globe of global warming. It's a planetary view that tries, it's hard, we will see, the environmental and the post-colonial. In adding environmental emphasis to the post-colonial, we are able to think about the long-term effects of colonialism beyond the human scale. And by bringing post-colonial lessons to environmental discourses, we can pick apart ideas of racialized purity and unspoiled past that still lurk in ecological ideas and practices, and that must be uprooted for a climate justice proper to be conceived. So I'm very pleased to hand the podium now to Jumana Mana.